Hey, welcome to the Shoebox. So today we're going to be talking about Alton Coleman. Alton Coleman was born November 6th, 1955. He was an American serial killer who, along with his accomplice, Debra Brown, she was born November 11th, 1962. They committed a crime spree across 6 states between May and July 1984, dude. They resulted in the death of 8 people. Coleman was to receive death sentences in 3 states and was executed by the state of Ohio in 2002. So let's get to the journey. Alton Coleman lived in Illinois. His mother worked 3 jobs, and he lived with his grandmother that was 73 years old. Coleman was a middle school dropout. Coleman was well known to Illinois law enforcement, having been charged with sex crimes 6 times, 6 times between 1973 and 1983. 2 of those cases was dismissed, with Coleman pleading guilty to lesser charges and twice being acquitted. He was scheduled to go on trial in Illinois on charges stemming from a rape of a 14-year-old girl when he fled and began his killing spree. Now, they say Coleman was diagnosed with personality disorder, possibly antisocial, narcissistic, and obsession features, borderline disorders. Now, it says Debra Brown was his wife. She was one of 11 children. She was intellectually disabled because she suffered a head trauma when she was a child and was diagnosed with dependent personality disorder by a physician. She was engaged to another man when she met Coleman in 1983, but left her family and moved in with him shortly. Although a willing participant in Coleman's assaults and his murders, Brown had no history of violence or any criminal history prior to their relationship. Coleman and Brown confirmed their first murder when they killed, this is so sad, when they killed 9-year-old Vernita Wheat from Wisconsin. After Coleman had befriended her mother, Janita Wheat, he abducted the little 9-year-old and took her to Waukene on May 29, 1984. It's so sad because he disposed her body. Her disposed body was discovered on June 19th in an abandoned building 4 blocks from the apartment of Coleman's grandma's house. It was determined she had been raped, and the cause of her death was strangulation. On May the 31st, Coleman befriended Robert Carpenter and spent the night at his home. The next day, he borrowed Carpenter's car to go to the store, and he never returned. Now, let's move on to Indiana and Michigan. In 1984 of June, Coleman and Brown encountered 2 young girls in Gary, Indiana. Sweet babies, 9-year-old Anna Turks and her niece, 7-year-old Tamika Turks. The couple sexual assaulted these 2 children, Anna survived the violent attack, but Tamika did not. Her partially decayed body was discovered on June the 19th. The same day, Donna Williams, a 24-year-old woman from Gary, had disappeared. Now, on July the 11th, her body was discovered in Detroit, Michigan, and half a mile from where her car was found. She had been raped and once again killed by strangulation. On June the 28th, Coleman and Brown entered the home of Mr. and Mrs. Palmer Jones, or of Dearborn Heights, Michigan, where they beat them severely. Coleman had ripped the telephone from the wall before stealing their money and their car. Ohio. On July the 5th, Coleman and Brown arrived in Ohio, where Coleman befriended Virginia Temple, the mother of several children. When Temple stopped communicating with her relatives, authorities entered her home and found her young children there alone and frightened. Temple and her eldest child, 9-year-old Rachel, had been strangled to death and left in a crawl space. On the same morning as the Temple murders, Coleman and Brown entered the home of Frank and Dorothy, Duvendike in Talano, who were bound with electrical cords which has been cut. The couple stole their money and car, and Miss Duvendike's stolen watch was later found under another victim. Later that day, Coleman and Brown visited the Daytona home of Reverend Gay and his wife, Catherine. The two stayed with the Gays and accompanied them to a religious service on July the 9th, where the next day the Gays dropped off the couple in downtown Cincinnati. Now on July the 12th, Toni Story, a 15-year-old girl who lived in Cincinnati, disappeared from her neighborhood. Her body was later discovered 8 days later. A bracelet that had been stolen from the Temples were later found under Stormy's body. On the day of Stormy's disappearance, the FBI added Coleman to its 10 most wanted list as a special edition as the 11th most wanted. Coleman was just the 10th person since the initial of the list in the 1950s came into effect. Coleman and Brown bicycled into Norwood on July 13th at about 9:30. Less than 3 hours later, they drove away in a car belonging to Harry Walters, whom they left unconscious, and his wife, Marilyn, who was raped and beaten to death. Walters survived and later testified that they had met the couple to discuss the potential purchase of a camper. But, get this, guys, Coleman attacked him with a wooden candlestick. The coroner indicated Marlin had been violently assaulted approximately 20 to 25 times. Being broken with a soda bottle, which Coleman's fingerprints was later found in the living room, and bloody footprints made by 2 different pairs of shoes were found in the basement. The Walters' red Pontiac, as well as money, jewelry, shoes, were all stolen. 2 bicycles, clothes, shoes not belonging to the Walters had been found left behind. Now down in Kentucky, to the return of Ohio, Illinois, and Indiana. 2 days later, the Plymouth was found abandoned in Kentucky, where Coleman and Brown had kidnapped Carmichael Jr., online Carmichael Jr., a college professor from Williamsburg, and drove back to Ohio with Carmichael locked in the trunk of his car. On July 17th, they abandoned this stolen vehicle in Daytona, and Carmichael, who was still locked in the trunk, was rescued by authorities. Coleman and Brown returned to the home of the Gays, accosting them with guns. Reverend Gay, who at this time recognized Coleman as a wanted fugitive, he asked him, "Why you want to do us like this? Like, why?" Coleman responded, "I'm not going to kill you, but we genuinely kill them where we go." Coleman and Brown took their car and headed back to Illinois. Along the way, they stole another car in Indianapolis and killed the owner, 75-year-old Eugene Scott. Now, we want to say that our love and condolences goes out to all these families. 3 days later, on July the 20th, Coleman and Brown was arrested in Evanston. As they walked westward across an intersection, they passed immediately in front of the motorist, who was from Coleman's neighborhood. The motorist drove north to a gas station, and he notified the police from a payphone. The couple was soon spotted sitting on a portable bleachers in an empty Mason Park. As two police officers, sergeants, approached Coleman and Brown, they was, observed walking away towards the rear of the park. Two other officers stopped Brown as she tried to exit the park. They searched her and found a gun in her purse. The pair was taken into custody without incident and transported to the Evanston police station, where both was identified by their fingerprints. Now, as they went to, strip search Coleman, they found a steak knife between two pairs of sweat socks he was wearing. A shopping bag full of t-shirts and caps were found in the couple's possession. Officers learned that the pair stopped every 3 to 4 blocks as they walked and changed their shirts and caps. A week after the arrest, more than 50 law enforcement officers from 6 jurisdictions met to their strategy for how to, prosecute Coleman and Brown. Seeking the death penalty for Coleman and Brown, Michigan was quickly ruled out because it did not employ the capital punishment, right? It was decided to give Ohio the first attempt at sentencing. So, on April the 25th, 2002, the Ohio Supreme Court rejected a claim by Coleman's attorneys that the state planned to accommodate the large number of victims and survivors who wanted to view the execution would turn it into a sport, spectator sport. So many victims and survivors of Coleman's crime were allowed to witness the execution that prison officials had to set up in a closed circuit venue outside the building. For his last meal, Coleman ordered a well-done filet mignon with mushrooms, fried chicken breast, and salad with a French dressing, sweet potato pie topped with whipped cream, French fries, collard greens, onion rings, cornbread, broccoli, and melted cheese, biscuit and gravy, and a cherry coke. Before his execution, he released a letter apologizing for what he'd done. Now, Brown, who was originally sentenced to be executed in Ohio, had her death sentence commuted to life imprisonment by the governor. In 1991, it also states that Brown was one of 8 Ohio death row inmates to have her sentence commuted by, it looks like a pony of capital punishment a week before he left his office. So despite her nonviolent history before the spree, Brown was initially pretty much let go for her acts. During the citizen phase of her first Ohio trial, she sent a note to the judge which read as such: "I killed the bitch, and I don't give a damn. I had fun out of it." She was also given a death sentence for the murder of Tamika Turks in Indiana. However, that sentence was ultimately commuted to 140 years imprisonment in 2018. Brown is currently serving her sentence without the possibility of parole at the Daytona Correctional Institution in Ohio. She finally expressed remorse for her crime, which she did apologize to the family in a video in 2005. So, once again, this is we're talking about Alton Coleman and Debra Brown on our crime information. You know what I'm saying, today in the shoebox, the sneaker box. We talking about them. I mean, man, once again, our hearts and our love and condolences goes out to the family, and just comment below, how you feel about this crime spree, you know what I'm saying, that they basically went on. And how do you feel about, do you know the victims and their families? Do you want to leave a message for the victim and their families? So yeah, we're gonna definitely take a look more into this. I am seeing something about it was racial motive, and I tell you, man, it's sad. It's really sad. So thank y'all again for watching the sneaker box, and tomorrow we'll have another update, another story to share with you guys. Thanks again. Don't forget to like, sub, and drop a comment for us.